Welcome to Cost Saver Conversations. I'm Angela, and I ask the practical questions so you can quickly understand what matters. Today, I'm joined by Assad.
Hi, Angela. We are unpacking Maximizing Rental Profits, avoid these 7 hidden costs landlords overlook today, and tying it back to the wider cost-saver ecosystem, including tools like Landlord Rental Yield Calculator and Rental Yield Calculator, so you can turn insights into action quickly.
Just a heads up before we dive in, we are your synthetic hosts. We are great with numbers, but as AI, we can sometimes be confidently wrong. Think of us as the digital versions of your most knowledgeable, slightly caffeinated friends.
Exactly. Treat this chat as a smart estimate only, not as professional financial guidance. Always check important details with official sources or a qualified expert before making any big decisions.
Welcome back, everyone. So today we are getting into something that I think is going to save some people a lot of money, or at least stop them losing it without realizing. We're talking about hidden costs for landlords. Assad's here, as always. Assad, I feel like this is one of those topics where people think they've got it figured out, and then they really don't.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, the classic thing is someone sits down at their kitchen table, right, works out the rent, subtracts the mortgage, and goes, "Great, that's my profit." And estate agents love presenting it that way because it makes everything look generous.
Right, because it's such a clean number.
It is. It's tidy. It feels good. But the problem is that calculation is missing about a dozen line items that are going to show up whether you've planned for them or not. And we're not talking about like freak disasters. We're talking about a boiler dying, a tenant leaving, a new bit of legislation that needs a certificate or an inspection or a fee. Just the normal, boring stuff of owning property.
And the source material says that mistake, just that simple rent minus mortgage sum, costs the average UK landlord somewhere between £2,000 and £4,000 a year in stuff they didn't budget for. That's not nothing.
No, it's really not. And the thing is, it's not one big hit. It's lots of small things quietly chipping away at your yield, which is kind of harder to notice, honestly.
So there's an example in here that I thought was really telling. Sarah from Leeds.
Yes, Sarah. So she bought her first buy-to-let in 2022. $180,000 flat, $975 a month in rent. On paper, 6.5% gross yield. Looks great, right?
Sounds lovely.
2 years in, 6-week void, a $2,400 boiler replacement, selective licensing fees of £825, and then the mortgage interest tax changes on top of all that. Her actual net yield, 2.8%.
Oh, wow. That's less than half of what she thought she was getting.
Exactly. And she wasn't unlucky. She just hadn't budgeted for reality. Does that make sense? Like, none of those things were unusual.
No, totally. They're all just things that happen. Okay, so let's go through these 7 hidden costs one by one. What's number 1?
Void periods. The gap between one tenant moving out and the next one moving in. And most landlords they plan for 0 voids, which is honestly wishful thinking dressed up as a business plan.
That's a good way to put it. But the mortgage doesn't care that the flat's empty, does it?
No, the mortgage still needs paying. Council tax flips to you, utilities are ticking over. On a property with a, say, $1,000 monthly mortgage, every empty month costs you roughly $1,300 once you add council tax and utilities on top.
Wait, really? So it's not just the mortgage you're eating, it's more than that.
Yeah, and the realistic UK average for voids is somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks per year, though it varies. I mean, student lets can be much longer over summer. High-demand commuter towns almost nil if the property's well presented. But as a baseline, build in at least 3 weeks of voids per year when you're modeling.
And there's a really scary warning in here about bad tenants.
Oh yeah. So a single bad tenant who has to be evicted, you're looking at a void of 3 to 6 months once you factor in the court process, repairs, reletting. And with Section 21 reforms working through Parliament right now, eviction timelines are likely to get longer, not shorter. So reference checks they're not optional.
Right. Okay, cost number 2?
Maintenance. The thing is, properties wear out. That's just what they do. Boilers die at the worst possible moment. Washing machines flood kitchens.
Roof tiles slip in the first proper storm. None of it's dramatic, but all of it costs money.
So, what should people actually set aside?
A sensible rule of thumb is roughly 1% of the property value each year. So on a 200,000 flat, that's $2,000 a year, about $167 a month. Some years you'll spend nothing, other years you'll replace a boiler at 2,500 and repaint the whole interior for another 1,500 to 3,000.
And there's a whole list of big ticket items in the source: kitchens, bathrooms, windows.
Yeah, over a 10-year holding period, you need to be thinking about things like a kitchen refresh, which could be 3,000 to 8,000, bathroom, 2,500 to 6,000, new flooring, 1,500 to 4,000. These aren't if, they're when, you know?
And then there's the energy efficiency angle, which I thought was interesting because it's sort of a cost, but also an investment.
Right, exactly. Energy efficiency upgrades sit in a slightly different category because they pay you back over time. But the big thing is, minimum energy efficiency standards are likely tightening to Energy Performance Certificate C by 2028 for new tenancies. And if you wait and have to rush it, you could be looking at 5,000 to 15,000 in upgrades. Getting ahead of that saves you a fortune.
Oh, that's actually reassuring in a way, like spend a bit now, save a lot later. Okay, number 3, compliance, certificates, licensing. This feels like a minefield.
It is. It absolutely is. And it's the area where new landlords get caught out the most because the compliance burden has just grown steadily over the last decade. And "I didn't know" is not a defense that holds up anywhere. Not in court, not with insurers, nowhere.
So, what do you actually need?
Okay, so the non-negotiables. Gas safety certificate, renewed annually, around $80 to $120. Electrical installation condition report, every 5 years, $150 to $300. Energy performance certificate, valid for 10 years, $60 to $100. Then smoke and carbon monoxide alarms tested at the start of every tenancy, Legionella risk assessment, particularly if you've got water tanks, and right-to-rent checks for every adult occupant in England.
That's already a lot. And then there's licensing on top?
Yeah, so many councils now run selective or additional licensing schemes. Fees vary enormously, from a couple of £100 to over $1,000 per property. License usually lasts 5 years. And if your property falls in a designated area and you don't license it,
Let me guess, big fines?
often $10,000 or more per offense.
Per offense. Yeah. And there's the deposit protection thing too, right?
Right. Every deposit has to go into a government-approved scheme within 30 days. If you don't do it and a tenant takes you to court, you can be hit for up to 3 times the deposit value. The custodial schemes are actually free, but you just have to actually do it. Set a reminder.
Fair enough. Okay, cost 4, letting agent fees. I feel like people know these exist, but maybe don't realize how much they actually add up to.
That's exactly it. So there are basically tiers. Tenant find only is usually 8% to 12% of the first year's rent paid up front. Rent collection, around 8% to 10% of monthly rent, ongoing. Full management, typically 10% to 15%, ongoing. And then there's inventory fees, check-in fees, tenancy renewal fees, inspection visits. It all adds up.
So give me a real example. A property at, say, $1,200 a month on full management.
At 12%, that's $144 every month, $1,728 a year, before VAT. That's a meaningful chunk of your gross rent, and it has to be in your yield calculation from day one.
And you mentioned renewal fees. That one got me. Some agents charge 8% to 10% of annual rent every time a tenant just signs again?
Even though no new work has been done. Yeah, always negotiate that out before you sign with an agent. Always. It's one of those things, you know?
I hadn't thought about it like that. Right. Number 5, tax changes. This is where it gets,
Complicated?
yeah, let's go with complicated.
So buy-to-let taxation changed dramatically from 2017 onwards, and a lot of landlords still calculate their post-tax profit as if the old rules apply. The big one is mortgage interest relief. It's now a 20% tax credit, not a deduction from rental income.
which means higher rate taxpayers effectively pay tax on rental income before the mortgage is paid. For some people, that turns what looked like 4,000 pounds of annual profit into basically break even.
That's brutal. And stamp duty?
5% surcharge on additional residential properties in England. That was raised from 3% in late 2024. Then capital gains tax when you sell at 18% or 24% depending on your income band. And then, and making tax digital becomes mandatory for landlords earning over 50,000 pounds from April 2026 and over 30,000 from April 2027.
So the shoebox of receipts era is officially over.
Very much so. And some landlords now hold properties through a limited company to keep full mortgage interest deductibility. But I should say that's not right for everyone. Company mortgages have higher rates, accountancy costs more, extracting profits has its own tax implications. You really need to talk to an accountant before doing that.
Good caveat. Okay, cost 6. Insurance, arrears, legal cover. Standard home insurance doesn't cut it, I'm guessing.
No, not at all. You need proper landlord insurance. Buildings cover for a typical flat is 200 to 400 pounds a year. Contents, if it's furnished, another $100 to $200. Rent guarantee insurance, which covers you if a tenant stops paying, $150 to $300 per property per year.
And that's worth it because an eviction costs...
A Section 8 or Section 21 eviction in England, once you add up court fees, bailiff fees, lost rent, legal advice, regularly tops 5,000 pounds. So yeah, the insurance pays for itself pretty quickly if things go wrong. But, and this is important, most rent guarantee policies require you to reference through an approved provider before the tenancy starts. You can't just claim after the fact.
Oh, so you have to set it up properly from the beginning.
First week, not first month. Have I explained that clearly? Like you can't retrofit it.
No, that's really clear. Okay, last one, cost 7. Utilities and council tax between tenants. This is the one that sort of sneaks up on you.
It really does. When the property sits empty, you're liable, and council tax is the big one. Most councils now charge full council tax on empty properties from day one. And from April 2, 2024, councils can charge double council tax on properties that have been empty for just 12 months. That used to be 2 years. Some apply premiums of 100% to 300% for longer-term empties.
Double council tax after just a year. That's a lot.
And then you've got standing charges for gas and electricity, even with no usage, water and sewage charges, and if you're doing bills included lets, which is common for HMOs and student properties, energy costs become a permanent line item, not just a void period thing. And with volatile wholesale prices recently, that's become much riskier than it used to be.
Because tenants on flat rate bills just use more?
They tend to, yeah, significantly more than tenants paying their own. So you're effectively running a small energy business alongside a letting business. Price reviews should be annual, not every 5 years when you finally notice your margins vanished.
Right. Okay, so after all 7 of these costs, what's the real gap between what a property looks like on paper and what you actually take home?
So once you add up voids, maintenance, compliance, agent fees, tax, insurance, and utilities, the gap between gross and net yield is usually 30% to 50% of the headline rent. A property advertised at a 7% gross yield might actually deliver 3.5% to 4.5% net, and that's before factoring in your own time.
30 to 50%. That's a wake-up call.
It is. But look, and I want to be clear about this, that's not a reason to walk away from buy-to-let. Plenty of landlords make a healthy return, particularly outside the Southeast where capital values are lower relative to rents. The ones who lose money are almost always the ones who just didn't budget for the boring stuff.
So what's the practical takeaway? Like, if someone's listening to this and they're about to buy, or they already own a property and they're thinking, oh no, what should they actually do?
Okay, so quick checklist. 1, run your gross and net yield calculations with realistic assumptions, not the rosy ones. 2, build in at least 3 weeks of voids per year. 3, set aside 1% of property value annually for maintenance. 4, budget for all your certificates, licenses, and insurance. 5,
Calculate your actual tax position based on your real income band, not the old rules. 6, and this is a big one, stress test the deal at a 2% higher mortgage rate. If it still works, great. If it doesn't, you know.
And 7?
Visit the area at different times of day before you buy. Sounds simple, but you'd be amazed how many people skip that.
That's such good advice. Asad, thank you. This has been genuinely really useful. I think the message is basically go in with your eyes open, budget for reality, and do the maths properly. The boring stuff is what separates the landlords who make money from the ones who don't.
That's exactly it. The boring stuff. Every time.
Quick side note, this guide connects with other cost-saver blogs, especially Complete Guide to Home Insulation ROI, Postcode Crime Data and Rental Risk Guide, and Free Ways to Cut Energy Bills this winter.
Exactly. And reading those together helps you connect the dots across your household budget, not just this one topic in isolation.
And if you want to apply this immediately, jump into tools like Landlord Rental Yield Calculator and Rental Yield Calculator right after this episode. That wraps this cost-saver conversation with Angela and Asad. If this helped, share it with someone who could put these ideas to work this week.
Your next step is simple. Try Landlord Rental Yield Calculator, then read Complete Guide to Home Insulation ROI, and use them together to take action today.